let's start off with a brief recap of part one of program architecture that we discuss, and then we'll discuss program architecture and why it's important.
All right, and so let's go back into the studio to do that.
Let's do it.
All right. Right, welcome back to the studio for part
Yes.
two, Jacque. Now, what we'll do is very quickly give an overview of the 10-step process, right, before we actually get into part two topics.
That's correct. And as you just said, it's 10 steps,
Yep.
and then there are 4 major elements associated with the process. And we
Okay.
talked about that last week. Again, we focus on the program architecture mission, products and services, the program execution organization, and then the summer schedule, which gets us into the BIMs and the IMS and those things.
Okay, and now last week we covered essentially the major milestones and a little bit about each of the steps.
Yep, and we're going to get into more detail this time.
Okay. Now, Jacque, what is a SWBS or CWBS? I mean, I see 3 kind of circles with a Venn diagram here. So what is a CWBS?
Right. So first of all, the contract WBS or work breakdown structure, or WBIS, which I've never liked that term personally, is the cornerstone of all of your reporting, and it's also critical to the architecture of what you're developing for the proposal, because it's really the breakdown of how the work itself, not how the work's going to be done, but the actual breakdown of the work. And what you'll see in this diagram is kind of where it plays in the life cycle. This isn't a timeline. You've got your contract fund status report, so that's going to be an ongoing report post-award.
Okay.
You've got your integrated program management data and analysis reporting, your IPM DAR, and then you've got your contract, cost data. And these are all post-award things, but to get to this, you have to set up all the baselines and foundations for these elements, which should be occurring during your proposal activity.
Jacque, that sounds incredibly complicated. It really does.
I don't know, AJ, I do it, so how complicated can it be?
Well, people say it's not rocket science, but I think it really might be rocket science. All right, now, Jacque, part one, we talked about how critical IPTs or integrated product teams are. Can you just tell us what is an IPT?
So, most people think of an OBS as an organizational structure or a product breakdown structure, right? Yeah. Okay. But an integrated product team is a way of organizing your workforce based upon the products that you're going to develop. So you're not focused on building the end item. There's a lot of things that go into it. So, the subparts of it. Whether if you're thinking about an aircraft, it'd be the empennage and the fuselage and the wings and the motors and landing gear and all that.
So it's not an organizational structure how your company's function organized, but it's more about the organizational structure of how the program is going to really get the work done.
Well, it's more about taking up each product. So let's say an engine. That would be one product team. Avionics is another product team. And they have cross-functional elements. In other words, all of the, you might have mechanical, electrical, software in each of those groups. But what you've done is created a team for that piece of the product.
So if you have individual products, how do the products come together to create a system?
So that's where your system architecture comes in. But also, that's where the IMS becomes really important, because as you complete those products, then you look at the activities around integration, which is integrating those products into the final assembly.
And is there a separate IPT for integration?
There is, actually.
Got it.
Yep.
Jacque, schedules can be really complicated. This is not so complicated. Maybe it's just a slice of a complicated schedule, but can you just talk about what integrated master schedules are like?
Yeah, so this is actually a master phasing schedule, and it's probably
phasing is the key word.
Yes. Okay. And it's probably one of the most important things. Some people call this the one-pager or the master phasing schedule, but the reason it's important is it's a program on a page where you can literally see all at the top here. You can see all the key events that are going to happen. You can see the major elements. So like program management, systems engineering.
It's a little bit of an eye test, isn't it?
A little bit of an eye test, but if done right, everybody's carrying this around in their pocket, saying when you start talking about the program, says no, we're not going to do that until we get to this.
To that, right? Got that.
And a little bit of an anecdote on that, So we were on a program where it was a power distribution system, and everybody had this dialed in as it had been laid out, and I kept looking at the quality engineer and the guy who was responsible for test, and I could tell he got nervous every time somebody talked about this. And so what we realized, and we sat down and had a conversation with him, is that the idea of build, test, ship
Right.
wasn't going to work in this situation because in order to test the second component, you needed the first one. In order to test the third component, you needed the first two.
So okay, so it was complicated.
It was very complicated,
Okay.
and so we actually had to re-wicker all of this and not simply say build this
One
cabinet, ship
test,
it.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not sequential. There's a lot of concurrency.
And that's where this helps because
All right.
it boils it down
Okay.
to something everybody can
So
consume.
I'm going to do now in proposals. Is this typically because it's not an eye test like a fold out?
It can be certainly a fold out.
Okay.
It's an eye test here
got it.
because we.
But for the rest of us working on a proposal, we should fold it up.
Yep,
Like this, right?
that's right.
And put it in your back pocket.
That's right.
So whenever someone says, when is such and such going to occur? You go,
I've got it.
I got it.
That's right.
Right? It's
That's
going
right.
to be on April 20th of 2025. Right, Jacques?
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Got it. All right. Excellent. Jacques, integrated master plans are incredibly important in the process, as we talked about in part one. Can you just kind of give us an overview of how one should get created?
Yeah. So the thing about an integrated master plan is it's a hierarchical structure.
Uh-huh.
You start off with your key events, PDR, CDR, TRR, those main events in the program.
Okay.
And then you break those down into what we call significant accomplishments. Those things, those major things that have to be done in order to complete that event. Each of those major accomplishments then has an accomplishment criteria, which are the series of things you have to do to complete that major event. So again, it goes back to you can't eat the elephant all in one bite, so you got to figure out how big are the bites, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there we get into our control, our breakdown of tasks and the IMS, your control accounts or work packages and those types of things, and it all breaks down into that. Now the thing about the IMP itself is that what you're really doing is you've identified all of the requirements. And you now need to align those requirements to these accomplishment criteria, and then also be able to align where your risk occurs in those, where you're when you're gonna mitigate risk associated with these things. You're gonna identify what style paragraphs it supports.
Okay.
All of those things. It's kind of your Rosetta Stone.
Sounds like it's a catalog or Rosetta. Got it.
It's your Rosetta Stone for how you're going
term.
to organize all of the things in the program you're going to actually have to accomplish.
Right. Now, wow. Okay. Complicated. I know in a lot of RFPs these days, compared to the 90s and early 2000s, customers actually don't ask for the IMP, but they ask for the IMS.
They do. But the thing about building the IMP first is it gets you organized. It makes sure, very much like we do a compliance matrix, this is the compliance matrix in essence for the IMS. It makes sure you don't miss anything.
Except you should still create one, even if it's not asked for.
I don't know how to build an IMS without it.
Jacques, speaking of IMSs, can you talk about kind of what's the simplified view of how to create one?
Right. So the first thing we do is we start off with the IMP, right? And we look at in our program, ground rules and assumptions, our use of verbs, all those things that we talked about. Then it's a process again. We actually look at building. So the first is we define what tasks we're going to have. Right. Okay. What are the things we got to get done? And that's
the list of activities.
Right. That's the list of activities. Right. So you create your list. Then you create then what I like to do is then organize them in time. Then you start thinking about the logic associated with it.
What has to occur first?
Right.
For the next thing.
Right, because where people get in trouble is they start trying to create all this logic and then it becomes spaghetti. So if you orient in time first, make sure they're aligning to the accomplishment criteria, major accomplishments, and so on that they're supposed to be supporting. Your tasks are going to be well organized and aligned. Then you can start thinking about your logic. Your predecessors, successors, lags, and so on. And actually, you end up with a much cleaner schedule that way.
And that's something which I think people have to get used to, because usually people have natural tendencies to think about the logic along as you think about the task, and you define the necessary tasks based on logic.
That's
Instead,
right.
think about all the activities and have a good sense of what those are, and then think about the logic.
Exactly. And if you take that one step further and break it down by the IPTs that are occurring in that segment, what you're doing is you're not trying to eat the elephant all in one bite. You're taking it in small segments. You think about what things your subs need to provide you as far as schedules. So that's step one.
I never understood that saying, because I imagine elephants probably aren't that tasty.
You probably never had one. So
okay, I'm glad to hear that. All right, so that's the IMS, right?
And then from there you create your baseline, and then you validate. You do all your validation on the IMS as well as SRAs and things like that have to happen.
Risk. Talk to us about risk. How we identify it in the proposal and in the program architecture, and then how do we talk about mitigating it?
Right. So, last week we talked about risk, and you and I had a discussion about the whole idea that it's so important to identify risk early. Because
and even you don't be afraid of identifying it to your customer.
That's right, because it shows that you understand the complexities of the problem you're being asked to solve.
Yeah.
Right. So when we think about risk too, it's a burn down, because you're going to identify all this risk up front. Some of the risk is going to be naturally retired; it didn't emerge. Okay. Other risks you're going to have to mitigate and work around.
So when you mean by burn down, I mean it's like you've got a set of risks which you're going to first mitigate first, and then the next set that you're going to mitigate, and then next set, or what do you think about when you say burn down? What does that mean?
That's actually a great question. So when we think about risk itself, you try to identify all the things that could go wrong. Murphy's Law, right? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So you try to identify what all those things are, and then if it were to happen, what would you do? Would you decide you're going to go find a different sub? You're going to go buy a different part. You're going to bring stuff in house. Whatever those mitigation activities are, you're going to end up doing more rounds of testing. As you go through the program, not all of your risks are going to emerge. Some things could happen but never did. You retire those after you get to a certain point.
So it's like it's the burn down reference is about actually as you go through the program and your risk mitigation plan, you're actually mitigating them and you get fewer and fewer risks.
That's right.
That you have to deal with. Okay.
That's right. And then some risks you do have to mitigate, but the whole idea is never get caught off guard.
Okay.
And you're also what you're really doing is you're trying to capture the known unknowns.
Yeah.
Right. You don't know. You know what it could happen. You just don't know when or if it will happen. And then if it happens, how much budget do you have to mitigate it. Right. It's all about the whole planning process.
Right. And I know in many proposals we do a two-dimensional view of risk. Right.
That's right. And what that helps you with is because you've got consequence and probability.
Yep. So probability and then essentially criticality or consequence of the risk actually emerges. How important is it to mitigate?
Because if you've got low probability of it happening and low probability of an impact, it's not a big deal. If you have low probability of it happening but a high impact, you want to be aware of it, but you're probably not going to spend a lot of time there. It's the ones in that upper right-hand corner you got to worry about. High probability and high consequence.
Got it. Okay. Okay, now I know resource loading is a bit of a loaded question because a lot of proposals don't require you to submit one, but it's almost like you have to have one in order to do your costing properly, right?
That's right. And honestly, I actually believe it's easier to do your costing if you've done a resource loaded schedule because it's forced you to think through how are we going to get all the work done, and it also helps you balance and load your resource plan. You're not peanut butter spreading across things. You're really thinking about how you're going to utilize the manpower that you have, and that actually should influences the IMS itself. But the whole idea behind this is that you want to plan your development of your estimates. You want to plan the development of take your execution plan and start building in those resources, and then look at balancing those things out. You got to think about the scope. What levels of people you're going to use. All of those things become a part of the criteria. And you were talking last week about realism, right? Really important. This really is important to helping you develop that realism in your plan.
And I see in this illustration we also have the BOE writing process as integral to this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And because the idea is if you get the resource loaded IMS and you can hand that plan to the folks that are actually what you do is you use that to feed the BOEs. Then you can make adjustments based on price, based on funding, based on a variety of things. And it's a decision loop that occurs that helps you get to a quality schedule.
And you have to have one in order to write a BOE.
That's right.
Or else you write the BOE about.
Exactly right.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you, Jacque. So, incredible, part 2. And there's a lot of parts of the book we didn't cover, lots of topics and details. But thank you so much, Jacque.
Thank you for letting me do this. This is where area I have a lot of passion about.
Indeed, of course. And the certificates, we'll figure out a way to get folks certificates into their top profile.
That's right.
And please continue to watch these types of town halls where we offer training sessions. It's really important. It's our way of keeping everyone up to date about how we think about things at SMA, about essentially the latest that's occurring in terms of our business trends. And thank you for attending these part 1 and part 2. I think we're going to try to provide the slides as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about this also is that you have to have an idea of how you're going to tackle any problem. That's why we developed our proposal training. That's why we've written, so many books on the different topics of things that we do. And this is just part of that. Yeah. If you're going to get ready to go to a client, arm yourself.
Take the book.
Take the book. Be prepared.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we were running a proposal, and I walked in for a pink team review, and I couldn't believe it. There's our books on the table, and they were dog-eared, right? You could tell people had been using them.
That's great to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, it was great
to see and hear.
Always, right? Well, AJ, that has been a very quick overview of the program architecture.
Yeah,
book.
almost too quick.
Too quick, right? Yeah, I mean, you really need to read the book, as I said a few minutes ago.
Indeed. Now, thank you, Jacque. And, I think we probably should do this training session annually.
Yep. Right? Yep. And like you said earlier, we're going to do one of these for each of the books that we have.
Absolutely. And any other topics that we feel are important. Yeah.
So, AJ, as you know, I love program architecture, and we'll be glad to come back in 2024 and do this. And sorry if we didn't get to the answer of anyone's questions in the chat, but for more information about program architecture, you can go to Amazon for a copy of the book if you like paper. Yeah. For those of our associates who are in the audience, you can go on to our Knowledge Management Center, and the electronic versions of the book are there.
You can get to it two ways: our SharePoint Knowledge Management Center, as well as from the Todd Learning Center. Yep.
That's right. And of course, you can send me questions directly if you have them.
And I'm going to challenge our audience members. Please send Jacque a bunch of hard questions on this topic, please.
I love it. I'd love it if that would happen.
Okay.